Welcome back to the Phoenix Mercury podcast. I'm Erica Day, and this is my co-host Steven. We got Shane producing for us today. We were really excited about this show today until about an hour and a half, I'd say, ago, and we got some news that Brittney Griner had injured her toe. And we saw her on Friday at the preseason game on the scooter, but now today we got some further clarification about what is going on with her. And it looks like she is going to be out for at least a couple of weeks with a broken toe. Steven, any first words on that?
Yeah, first of all, ouch. Ouch in a physical sense, but ouch also in a hit to the roster. Definitely hope that Brittney's able to get through the healing process so that she can get back to obviously being on the court for the team. But for the team in particular, this is one of the weaknesses I had, which we'll get to later on as far as health goes, because I feel like they can insulate at nearly any other position in some capacity, except for at the center spot right now. And naturally, I think even before the injury news occurred, I'm almost positive the team was scouring the market for players either in free agency or they were recently waived as the cut deadline came today, just to see who all could potentially either fit with the context and opportunity that they have to provide, but also to kind of help to insulate knowing that Brittney would be out in the short term as well. I imagine those efforts have grown a little bit more urgent over the last 90 minutes or so. But at the moment, there's a big void to be filled in the center position. And while I do think that's a clear negative just because of everything that Brittney means to the identity of the team, in addition to the offensive and defensive processes, I also feel like there might be some opportunity there that I think would be beneficial for the team operating without her, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later. But I'm curious, Erica, what are your thoughts on the injury, the shock value, and what you think it'll kind of have implication-wise?
Well, coming into the show today, I was really excited to talk about rebounding, and that was like the biggest takeaway I had Friday night at the game was in the first half. I want to say the rebound count was 28-8, and when you have a center like Brittney Griner that's 6'10", you are obviously going to struggle to rebound without her. But I think when you have a margin like that, losing her permanently definitely changes things in a little bit in terms of our expectations for the early part of the season.
Yes, correct. And looking at, in particular, the schedule with that early portion of the schedule, pretty much every team they're going up against has legitimate playoff desires in some capacity. And that's going to make for some difficult sledding. I'm curious, did you have any more thoughts on Brittney? Otherwise, we can kind of transition to the next topic.
Not in particular. I think that Brittney, it brings a lot to the table as far as team morale goes, but I think that there's so much to be built on right now that without her, it's not going to really affect on too much on the morale of the team. I think when you start to talk about late in the season, her being out is a completely different story. So, kind of not a positive, but definitely something to take away is at least it happened early in the season versus, late down the stretch when we're looking to make a playoff run.
Yeah, that's a great point. Timing wise, I mean, obviously an injury is never good, but it couldn't be better considering we haven't seen this team play an actual regular season game yet. They're just, transitioning from training camp to the regular season. So I think that's a great point from you. I think outside of the rebounding, which you talked about, is going to be a glaring thing for them to chip in. I think they'll be emphasizing gang rebounding from all five players on the floor a whole lot more than they would when Brittney would actually be in the lineup. So naturally, I think that's going to take away from something that I feel is extremely important in the process for them, which is going to be transition play. Because if you're not able to leak Kalia Copper ahead, if you're not able to leak Rebecca Allen ahead, if you're not able to leak Sophie Cunningham ahead, you're going to be playing at a little bit slower of a tempo and pace in terms of transitioning from defense and stop or rebound to offense. And while that does have it'll have some type of blowback on the team. I do think long term it'll give them a different way to go about garnering wins and just generally competing over the course of a game and just naturally playing without arguably your best player. And in addition to all of that, I think the biggest thing for me is going to be just looking at and pick and roll play and just general play on and off the ball when screens are involved. I think not having your best screener changes the impact of a lot of those things. But I think a caveat within all of that, which we saw a little bit in the preseason game on Friday, is that they're going to be able to compile a whole lot more reps with the best players on the floor screening for each other. That's going to make opponents have to toggle matchups or play in disadvantage on defense that's going to concede advantages to them to then play into. And I think, again, like I'm speaking to it through a playoff lens, it's going to be something that this team can really honestly have at its foundation because it's happening so early in the season. It's going to force their hand in expediting their process on offense and experimenting in a sense. And I'm looking forward to seeing how those things kind of work themselves out before Brittney comes back. And then naturally when she's back in the rotation, how everything that she brings works in combination with the things that they figured out in navigating without her.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I think that we have a really good opportunity to see players like Kalia and Shug push the pace with the ball and just push it forward in a little bit of a quicker succession in order to see the team score in a little bit of a higher rate, as opposed to trying to set an offense and play off the ball like that.
Yep, it's gonna be it's not gonna be the team that I think most fans are expecting to see brand wise in terms of what it looks like identity wise. But again, there's going to be a lot of benefits to reap from operating without your best player this early in the season. I think naturally it's going to also concede a whole lot more space. I think if you go back and watch the game against the Los Angeles Sparks on Friday, you'll see that in a lot of the possessions with the lineups that they were running, the paint was wide open. And I got to talk to um, coach after the game, and I think he mentioned that he was looking to show the film to Natasha Cloud and Kalia Copper when I asked about how important their drives are going to be. And naturally, the best way that they're going to be able to invert their offense and not be so perimeter oriented, especially without Brittney Griner, is going to be spearheaded by those two getting paint touches after paint touches after paint touches, whether to finish for themselves, play through contact, and get to the free throw line, which is also going to be important to the general shot profile without Brittney Griner, or just being able to get a paint touch and kick out and get a defensive rotation from there. I think those things are all going to be important. And I think it's going to help to expedite those two players in particular, integrating themselves into the process and playing the way that Coach Tibbetts is going to desire for them to, and then naturally being able to add that to, like I said before, what Brittney Griner is going to bring when she's back on the floor.
Is there anyone on this roster right now as it stands that you think can pull that can step into a center position, that can switch and play in the paint majority of the time and fill Brittney Griner's roles in any capacity?
Quite briefly, absolutely not. Because I mean, Brittney Griner is at her peak a top 5 player in the league, and at her peak also a top 5 defender in the league. And those shoes are quite literally impossible to replace at a replacement level value. Now, if you have a super sub, somebody like, let's just say Elizabeth Williams, or somebody that's been a stalwart and has started for teams before, that changes things a little bit. But the fact that this roster does not have it, no, it's definitely going to be a group effort in terms of filling those shoes in multiple capacities. But I do think it opens up a runway for somebody like Natasha Mack to kind of figure out a niche on this team now that she's made the roster. Just kind of figuring out, okay, where can I fit in? Can I do like these 2 or 3 specific things and do them extremely well? And while they might not result to a positive in terms of stats and minutes early on in the season, I know if I nail these 2 or 3 things consistently when Brittney's back, I'm going to be able to carve out some meaningful minutes for this team in the backup center position, which they don't have a true answer to, which is obviously maybe the biggest glaring weakness on the roster, looking at things on paper right now.
I'm curious to know how much they knew about Brittney's injury before the weekend, because it seems like they left a little bit of space in the uh, salary cap. And so I'm curious to see, there's 11 players on the roster, who they can bring in from free agency. Is there anyone that you've had your eyes on that you think maybe got cut today or recently that think could come onto this team?
Yeah, I had a chance to quickly just kind of scour the players that have been recently waived off of, like we talked about, the training camp deadline that came up today for teams to get to 12-player rosters or less. I think it's hard to find size because teams really hold on to their size, especially in that center position. But this player isn't particularly a center, but is a player that will help bring some identity in terms of crashing the glass, grabbing boards, and being a presence in the paint in a physicality perspective. And that's Monique Billings. Monique Billings has gotten around the league a little bit. Monique is a player that it's a walking brand of basketball. You know, if she's on the floor, elbow is going to be thrown in a legal, clean manner. She's going to clear space in the paint, and you're going to have a presence on the boards. That is extremely important to anything that you're trying to build, especially if you're trying to contend. The two biggest things when it comes to teams that contend that they have in commonality, they defend and they get on the glass. And Monique is a player that checks off a box in both of those respects in different ways than any other player on this Phoenix Mercury roster at the moment does. And I think that naturally she'll also have a role that could potentially be carved out in addition to Brittney Griner when Brittney does return to the floor. And just generally brings an adult to the room, somebody who's going to be no nonsense in the paint in particular. And I think that's something that this team with a lot of finesse and a lot of perimeter-oriented players can certainly use. And she also is not scared to set a screen and use physicality in different capacities on the offensive side of the ball as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring an interesting point about the physicality. I think she would fit in great with the Phoenix Mercury. I think that she plays the same brand of basketball as them and has that same will to win that we've kind of talked about before. I watched her a lot with the Dream last year, and she definitely exhibited a lot of the things that you just spoke about.
Yeah, for sure. So just kind of looking at who's actually available at the moment, that's the one name that I got a chance to scour through, and I saw that really stood out in terms of who's actually available right now. So that would be, if I had to say just one name, that's the one that I'm rolling with right now for the Mercury.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair assessment. Well, and immediately tomorrow, since we do play the Las Vegas Aces, you know, the defending champions, which is so exciting. Who do you think steps into her starting role tomorrow? Do you think it remains Natasha Mack? I haven't gotten anything about Sophie Cunningham being out, so I would think that she's going to be starting tomorrow. And so I would think that it's going to be Diana, Natasha, Kalia, and Sophie, and Natasha Mack. What are your thoughts on that?
That's where I'm a little curious where Coach Nate is with everything he saw from preseason, all of that fun stuff. And for me, I think there's a decision to be made, and we might see a little bit of back and forth with his decision on it over the course of the season, just to gather minutes and gather film to assess how the lineups look with these two on the floor. I think, and I'll actually just pose it to you before I dive into it. Would you start Sophie off of continuity and off of, just generally being a player that spent a lot of time with Diana Taurasi and defending the way that this team is going to need them to? Would you continue to start Sophie, or would you start Rebecca Allen?
You know, Beck was one of the players I walked away with on Friday saying, I apologize. I was not familiar with your game. And she was really exciting to watch. She dropped three after three after three in some points. And you're kind of like, damn, does this girl miss? And so I think you definitely pose an interesting question. I think that Beck earned a lot of minutes on Friday, and I think it's definitely up to Coach Nate on what style of basketball he wants to play against the Aces coming out of the gate, and if he wants to move forward with Natasha Mack or, it is interesting to think about Sophie not starting though. Actually, that definitely is a.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to get you thinking. I just saw the light bulb go
Yeah.
off of your head. Talk about it. Speak on it.
I think it would be an interesting plug off the bench. Also, her and Shug coming off the bench together, nonetheless, also would be a really fun duo to watch in the backcourt. So I think I have to almost argue that you're correct, and you either should be the coach of the Phoenix Mercury or you should call Nate up right now and tell him what to do.
That's funny. That's funny. Now, honestly, I'm just the more I've kind of thought about it over the last like 4 or 5 days, it makes more sense for me personally to see Sophie coming off the bench and seeing Rebecca Allen bring a little bit more size to the starting lineup, a little bit more defensive versatility, a little bit more connectivity on the offensive side of things, being able to make passes, play some secondary playmaking. Like I said, provide a little bit more size, somebody that has a little bit more veteran know-how at that particular position as a 3/4, and being able to kind of plug some of those gaps. And really, especially in the absence of Brittney Griner, provide more rim protection. I think that's something that with the wingspan, the condor-like wingspan that Rebecca Allen has, she can play a secondary rim protector role and being able to make some of the rotations that they're going to need should somebody get blown by off the dribble on the perimeter. And in addition to that, being able to just generally execute switches with effectiveness, which I think is something that they're going to lean into against the Las Vegas Aces in particular. And then I just think naturally her being a little bit more of a veteran type of player is going to bring a little bit more ease to everything that they're trying to establish in that starting unit. And then inversely or conversely, looking at it from Sophie Cunningham's perspective, if you bring Sophie off the bench as a 6-player type of role, first of all, I think that's a role she would thrive in. I think if she's optimized in that role and the pieces around her are optimized, she could potentially be a name that's top 5 in that 6th Player of the Year award come the end of the season. And I also think she won't have to think about shots when she's coming in a reserve role. She can come in and she can let 7, 8, 9 threes a game fly. And I'm sure Coach Nate is going to certainly co-sign for her to play to that role if she is in that role coming off the bench. And the other big thing, like you mentioned, with Shug, I think they can take on a different style and identity when she's on the floor. They can up the tempo, they can up the pace, they can get into a little bit more spacing, get up just generally more shots from deep and play with a little bit more movement and a lot of little things that are when you're scouring the league a little bit more customary to reserve type of units, whether they're blended with starters or if they go with the all 5 out type of reserve lineup. So I think there's benefits for both players in those particular roles. But I also think that it's somewhat of an embarrassment of riches for Coach Nate, because a lot of teams might have one floor spacer that can split time between the 4 and the 5 and the 3. For Coach Tibet's, he has 2 players that can do that. And there's a little bit of overlap between those two where you don't necessarily lose floor spacing when you have Sophie come in for Rebecca. You don't necessarily lose defense when you have Rebecca come in for Sophie. You might lose a little bit of size in that, but you're roughly getting a player that can serve similar purposes while also having different types of strengths within that. And I think there's beauty having some redundancy there at that particular position, especially with Brittney Griner as your mainstream center.
I will say that tomorrow is going to be an excellent opportunity to showcase Nate's plan to play without, Brittney. And obviously, it's not going to come together overnight. I don't expect it to. I saw some comments today saying we just hope we can maintain 500 until BG comes back. And I still don't think I have that attitude toward the season. I think obviously with playing Vegas 2 times in a week is not anyone's favorite way to start the season. I'm going to say it. That being said, once that's over, obviously things don't get easy, but they don't stay quite as difficult. And so hopefully this first week can be a really good learning experience for this team. They can grow more in terms of the chemistry that we've been talking about. And Nate can also kind of make a plan using these games to move forward without Brittney Griner in these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think that especially for Coach Nate and the type of dogs that he has on his roster, and again, we keep emphasizing capital D with the dogs. I feel like what better way to get a true assessment of where you are in your process, especially with so much newness around the team. What better way to tell truly where you are than to go up against the best team in the league, like the back-to-back champions. I feel like it's a type of test that obviously is going to test you in terms of your skill. You're going to get a great idea of where you are stacking up against the best team in the league. But you're also going to be able to tell, like I said, just in generally with the philosophies and things that he's trying to lay as a foundation with this team, where their weakest points are, because they will be exposed against a team that with the continuity and chemistry advantage that the Aces have, those type of things will be exposed. And I think it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing actually to go against a team like the Aces this early, because now you have those things on film and you'll be very concise in knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, being able to play to the strengths and be able to shore up the weaknesses off of film and apply those lessons going forward. Like we keep talking about the early juncture of the season, to where you're playing the Aces multiple times through your first quarter of the season. Through that first quarter, that's something that you can lay a foundation off of. So I think that's good for them. I think it's naturally you wish you had Brittney Griner to go up against those things as well, to make things make a little bit more sense, because you're always going to have the caveat of, well, we didn't have that big body in the paint. That's big to our identity and everything we generally desire to do this season. But naturally, I do think it's a great thing for the team to go up against them.
What's up, chat? I see Loudon in here, and I see Mr. Sean Sellers bringing up Elena Deladon. And listen, what a great idea that is. But I don't think we have quite that much cap salary space. Not that much.
Yeah, she's contractually not available this season as well. There's gonna be something to glean from that going after this season, since she's sitting out this season. When she comes back, is she still gonna be contractually obligated to the Washington Mystics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So we'll see about that.
Definitely interesting to watch her without Natasha and watch Natasha without her. It's gonna be a weird thing, huh?
Yeah, most definitely. And to watch the Washington Mystics without either one of those two players even more.
Yeah.
It's gonna be very, very interesting to see that play out.
Yeah. Nonetheless. All right. Well, looking forward, we do play the Mystics tomorrow. I'm pretty excited still. Nonetheless, I think it's going to be a awesome
The
time.
Aces. That's on me, because I brought up the Mystics. That's on me.
No. Okay, we play the Aces tomorrow. Again, we do play them first time tomorrow at 7:00, and then we play them again next Tuesday. So we get one little practice rehearsal against them. We come home, play the Dream, and then we get right back on the plane and go back to Vegas, which I think kind of sucks, but nonetheless, it's the bag of beans that we drew. So, what are you looking forward to seeing against the best team in the league?
Well, I think some of it kind of comes from what we were just speaking to, as far as seeing the team operating without Brittney Griner. I think there's going to be a lot to glean from that. But I think that's maybe the first thing, figuring out how they navigate the defensive side of the floor without having that particular rim protection, that elite level rim protection that gives your defense an entirely different look. As Natasha talked about to you in at Media Day, she said, first of all, let me preface with, I rarely get blown by, but in the event that I do, it's going to be a different type of safety blanket, knowing that I got Big BG behind me. Like, okay, that's cool. You blew past me. Now you got to deal with that, though. Mm-hmm. So I think not having that, now you got to deal with that behind you, is going to put an onus on their perimeter defense, which was certainly solid in their second preseason game against the Sparks. They were definitely up to snuff in multiple stretches, particularly in that second half. We saw them doing a much better job with their switches, doing a much better job communicating, being early with their help if need be, but also generally just containing the ball on the perimeter. And I think maybe that might be the biggest thing for me in watching the competitive fire that this team is going to play with, is how much urgency and how much desire are they going to have on the defensive side of the floor. I feel like Coach Nate was emphasizing that they needed to have a certain level that they reached on that particular side of the ball in that particular realm of it, for them to then get to the fun stuff on offense that they'll be able to do naturally. And I mean, again, who better to test that against than Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, insert Aces all-star level player here that they're going to be seeing in abundance tomorrow in front of their home crowd. So it's going to be fun to kind of gauge that. But I'm curious, what are you going to be kind of looking to see as a primary theme for tomorrow?
I'm excited to see Natasha step up and play a full game. I think that we kind of got nipped of the opportunity on Friday. Obviously, it's a preseason game. They were trying to give the rookies an opportunity. Shout out to my girl Bella, who was cut, and I'm so depressed about it. I'll never get over it. But nonetheless, I think that watching Natasha and Ka for a full game is going to be so exciting. And then kind of what you spoke to earlier, I really had never thought about the duo of Shug and Sophie coming off the bench and being that spark. And I think that that would be a really, really great thing to see against the Aces in particular. They're playing without Chelsea Gray tomorrow, so we do have a little bit of a benefit in that sense, but we are playing against the best of the best tomorrow. So I think it's a really good opportunity to see how our best of the best stand up to them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you brought up with depending on obviously what the lineup shake out to be for the Mercury in terms of who Nate decides to start. I do think that there's some positive contrast between Shug Sutton and Sophie Cunningham. You get into pick and roll or pick and pop play, which is again something that Sophie's been really almost forcefully integrated into the last 2 seasons, spending a lot more time playing the four. She can play in the short roll and make the passes that you need from the interior to the exterior and get a defense rotating from there. She can also pop, which is what she likely prefers to do even more. And it's easier to pop when you have somebody like Shug Sutton, who has one of the best first steps in the league. It's hard to stay in front of her, so she's going to be able to get downhill. And if she's able to get downhill, that's going to give your reserve units a little bit more of an identity in terms of the offense and things they're going to like to try to run when players like Diana or Kalia are sitting on the bench for rest purposes. So I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye on that tandem, regardless of who starts and who comes off the bench. I think we'll see time where they're going to be spending time on the floor together in lineups, and I think that's something that's definitely going to be relied upon, especially again without Brittney Griner, because you got to figure out how to make up for all of these different capacities that she serves as a scorer, as a screener, all of that fun stuff on the glass, defensively, So it's going to be fun to just see this team solve the Rubik's Cubes that's going to be playing without BG for likely the first quarter of the season.
On Friday, when I'm sitting there watching this game, they played really well, in my opinion. I think they kept their fight the entire game. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, if they could just rebound a freaking basketball right now, like, we're back in the game. Like, it's so over for the Sparks if we just rebound a basketball. And it just wasn't happening. So I'm really interested to see, Nate talked about in training camp, basically all they did was defense. So I'm interested to see what they've practiced over the weekend. I know that practice did not happen yesterday, but I'm sure they got together and watched some film, and I'm interested to see what they bring out of this weekend and improve on from Friday.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing the team that is going to be trying to experiment as much as possible. Because I think so, kind of like looking at things from a broader scope, being without Brittney, naturally you're going to have to try to figure out how to solve those minutes without her on the floor anyway. So now this gives you just a heap of space and opportunity to do that. You can experiment with multiple things, and like you talked about at the top of the show, because it's so early in the season, like, yes, you clearly want to win and win as much as possible, but also it gives you a little bit of wiggle room to where you can try to make up for things when, knock on wood, your roster is more healthy once Brittney comes back and hopefully through the finish line of the regular season. And again, I just think there's beauty in that. Obviously, it's going to be tough sledding, but I think there's beauty in trying to figure out how to stamp an identity without one of your identity pieces, and just generally figuring out how to operate without arguably, again, your best player on the floor.
Amanda says our rebounding has been our Achilles heel for years. Well, I'm hoping maybe that we have a new head coach, a lot of new pieces, that changes a little bit. I think we have some new athleticism on our team that changes our ability to rebound at certain positions. And so we'll see who steps up in these next couple of games and changes that for us.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people typically split the two with defense and rebounding, but I think they go very much hand in hand, because you quite literally can't get a stop on defense if you can't close possessions with the rebound to secure it. And again, that's something like Amanda just mentioned, that's something that's been a weakness of this team over the last couple of seasons. So figuring out the Rubik's Cube, how to solve these things, getting multiple efforts, not just in rotation defensively, but also on the glass, and then being able to secure possessions and play maybe at potentially the slightest bit slower of a pace and tempo that you would desire, again, just because of the massive loss that you're going to be working with likely through the first quarter of the regular season.
So a player we haven't really spoken about, I guess, is Liz Dixon, who I guess was signed a couple of days ago back to the Phoenix Mercury. So I would imagine that the intention for her was to step up in a little bit more of a bigger role than maybe was planned initially. Being that she's 6'5", she kind of brings some size that we're kind of lacking in the front court. So hopefully that she pans out well for the cat for the Mercury. Oh my gosh, almost said the Wildcats.
Yeah, Liz is quite literally the tallest player on the roster right now with Brittney out. So naturally, that's gonna create opportunity in terms of, again, like I talked about earlier, just carving out a niche, finding out opportunity for a role on the team. And I think another piece in addition to that is gonna be Morgan Birch, who is finally back stateside. Now, Morgan is not the tallest player, nor is Morgan the biggest player in terms of size. But I think Morgan just, again, gives you another piece that can kind of play the similar role to everything that you're going to be ultimately expecting from Rebecca Allen and Sophie Cunningham. I think that naturally, with Brittney out, it's going to a lineup that I've been expecting for Nate to use in his back pocket, and naturally he's being forced to use it a lot earlier than he likely desired to, is Rebecca Allen at the 5. It's something that's been a difference maker for a handful of teams that she's played for over the course of the last couple of seasons, actually, for her. Something that she's been successful in, just giving teams a change of pace at the center position. It's a different type of piece to account for when you have a team that might have more size and might not necessarily have the most fleet of foot type of front court pieces. Brittney's obviously occupying the paint, but when Beck is at the 5, now you got to account for that 7 or 8 steps that you wouldn't have to take with Brittney on the floor that you're going to have to Rebecca Allen, because she's knocking down corner 3-pointers with the best of them and can do so on volume. And again, when you tandemize that with the multiple drives that you're going to be seeing from Natasha Cloud and Kalia Copper, and the attention that's going to be garnered from those two players when they're able to get downhill to get a paint touch, you can throw Suge Sutton in that as well. You're starting to see the kind of puzzle pieces fit together and kind of shape a bit of a picture for the Phoenix Mercury. Now, again, you're not going to see the entire puzzle put together without arguably the biggest piece, literally and figuratively, to that. But again, you can start to just kind of see this team having to force their hand and play in certain ways early on that are ultimately going to benefit them down the line. And that's why I think that it's kind of twofold. Obviously, it's negative because you don't want to be without arguably your best player, but it's also positive because you get to experiment with your new toys and just kind of see how well they kind of fit together early on in the regular season.
A phrase you keep going back to, embarrassment of riches, and Nate just has to figure out how to use it all, right?
Exactly, but I think no better place for a brand new coach than to have a whole lot of things to play with versus just maybe a handful.
Yeah, and I definitely think the options are unlimited for him. I mean, he's got a lot of give, I feel like, on this roster right now. I don't think there's anyone on here that's inherently bad at basketball, so
That's always a great place to start for a head coach. Don't give me too many weaknesses, and he can clearly find the strengths and figure out what types of strengths he can pull out of this team.
yeah. Are Sophie Cunningham and Sean Murphy Bunting on the Cardinals official real hard hit? I don't, I'm not sure exactly. No, I'm going to say no is the answer to the question.
What you said.
I am bummed that I didn't get pictures of Brittney on the scooter because what the hell? Like they said it was probable, not that she was out weeks, on Friday. So what a terrible sight to see when I walk in and see her on the scooter on Friday.
Yeah, I'm curious. Just when the injury occurred. Was it at practice on Wednesday or
I'm going to
Thursday
say it.
or
I saw them Thursday,
right?
IRL at Media
Mm-hmm.
Day. Brittney was
Mm-hmm.
walking around just dandy and fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about defensive player of the year. You sat in, you heard the conversation. She said it, not me. And now she has a broken toe. So yeah, I don't know exactly. I guess it had to have happened maybe in shoot around. No. I don't know. I've got nothing.
Yeah, I'm genuinely curious to see. I'm sure hopefully you have the opportunity to get that, but I'm sure somebody's gonna ask probably before anything else. Yeah, so when did this injury happen? Because she was, dancing. She was typical Brittney. Even more upbeat than normal, to be honest. Like we talked about in the last episode at Media Day. No one would have guessed that she had any inkling of an injury. You would have thought she was 110% ready to run through a wall like she normally is.
Yeah, the vibes were impeccable, so I don't think that on Thursday when I saw them that there was anything wrong. I don't believe that for a minute, no. So I guess it had to have happened on Friday, which is really unfortunate. But I guess like we've talked about, thank God it happened now.
Mm-hmm.
Mid-June, it's mid-May right now. I would say that I would guess 6 weeks is my gander meant.
Safe bet right there. That's gonna be around probably a couple games into that second quarter, past that 10 game mark, around that second quarter stretch of the regular season. But that sounds about right by my estimation as well. 4 to 6 weeks.
My hope would that be she is back when we host the Liberty on June 18th. That would be a very clutch time, in my professional opinion, for Miss Griner to return to our roster.
Yeah, I think it gets concerning if it trickles all the way down into July, because now you're talking about getting closer to the halfway mark, and it's gonna be tough sledding again with the strength of schedule that they have coming out the gates for this regular season. So trying to get that player back in rotation is important. But I think also, like we talked about with Monique Billings, if they have somebody else that they potentially see as someone that could suffice for not just the long term behind Brittney, but the short term in place of her. And I put that in quotes because you don't just replace a talent the likes of Brittney. I think it's important. So they're gonna have to hit this one out the park with who they decide to bring in, and hope that player's impact can sustain, so that Brittney can, obviously heal and get back into basketball things in the manner in which they hope to do from the medical staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so with that, Arizona. Oh, yes. Sorry. That's what I was looking for. Where can we watch the games? Disney Plus tomorrow, ESPN2, both are viable options tomorrow. And then as far as the game on Saturday, that one will be on NBA TV, but it's also a home game. So if you have access to Mercury Live, it's $20 for the season. But they stream all the home games live there. So you can watch any of them on mercurylive.com, I believe is what the website is.
It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun just in general. Hearing the esteemed broadcast team that the Phoenix Mercury will have. Obviously spearheaded by Hall of Famer and basketball legend Annie Myers Drysdale, who is the sweetest soul. I had the opportunity to meet her a couple of times on the NBA side of things, and she there's like all timers that you can tell have spent years upon years in multiple respects tapping in with the game of basketball. Annie is quite literally one of those people, and you can tell it before you even have a conversation with her. And naturally, when she speaks, it resonates differently because it's coming from a place of hard work and dedication. And there was a fun interaction that I was able to witness in Indiana. She was having a conversation pregame at the availability for the Indiana Pacers coach Rick Carlisle, and they had some back and forth, just kind of speaking from an older age about things that were going on in the NBA back when Annie was in her prime years, and how I believe they had her come out to practice or something along the lines of that, and she came in, she was giving the fellas work. So just speaking to the legend that she is, just to see that connection and that organic conversation. And even Doc Rivers, by that same measure, I got a chance to see them have an interaction in Milwaukee this past NBA season, and you can see the way Rick Carlisle's eyes lit up when they saw Annie in the media room. You can say the same thing for Doc Rivers by the same measure, and just the level of respect and the tone of voice that was kind of switched and flipped when having that interaction with her. And I think that just speaks to, again, just the legend and the status that she has. and all that she's given to the game of basketball. So certainly don't take these opportunities to learn and listen to Annie speak about the game for granted, because it's definitely a treat.
Well, and her chemistry with Cindy Brunson is second to none.
Mm-hmm.
I love their
Mm-hmm.
broadcast. I love Cindy on Pac-12 Network. I love Cindy commentating the pros. It really doesn't matter. I'm a Cindy stan, if you will. So we love the broadcast team in this house.
Yeah, Cindy's a light. She's a light.
Yeah, the players, it's kind of like what you said, the players light up when she asks questions. They respect her when she speaks. She's just an overall wonderful human being. So I think the Mercury is very lucky in a lot of senses on who works with and around the team. There's nothing but good and awesome people surrounding this team right now. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm really looking forward to obviously seeing them assess the team in addition to us going forward. We got a fun little media group here in Phoenix, and just generally keeping eyes and tabs on the team. It's gonna be a very fun season. I'm looking forward to obviously enjoying it with all of our loyal fans and supporters. Don't forget to leave us a like and hit that thumbs up button for us. We really appreciate y'all.
yeah, absolutely. Like Steven said, please don't forget to oh my gosh, please don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to PHNX. They put out great content all the time. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and go to gophnx.com and become a diehard today. It's pretty fun in the chat, if I do say so myself. The Discord is a lot of fun. I kind of get made fun of because I think I have more fun in there than most of the people that pay to be there. So nonetheless, I think we've done great work today, Steven, and I'm super excited to come back on Thursday and actually have some more footage to talk to you about and some more gameplay to go over.
Yeah, it's plenty of content coming. In addition to seeing us Mondays and Thursdays, schedule dependent. Also be having plenty of things coming on the site with writing and film sessions on YouTube and on Twitter, and just general engagement on Twitter as well. So if you haven't followed us on there, make sure you do so ahead of tomorrow, and let's get the ball rolling, and let's clean up this basketball discourse space of ours and make it a fun one.
Thrilling. Well, we'll see you guys on Thursday.
We all silly like the mayor.